Hello everyone, how's it going? For today's video, it's hot. Yes, as you can clearly see. Behind me, I have a fan right there, and I'm also fisting another fan. I'm also holding another fan with my make-believe microphone because the one I'm currently having on top of the camera, she's kind of dying. So yeah, this is the aesthetic that we're going for in this video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about all the books I have recently read in the past couple of months. It's going to be a real chatty one, so you might want to kick back, sit back and relax, grab your snacks, the whole spiel, right? Also, I just want to quickly mention that I have a couple of cool announcements at the end of the video, so stay tuned. But before we get further into the video, a message from today's video sponsor. Cue the clip. Thank you to Happy and Polly for sponsoring today's video. So I am super excited to be collaborating with Happy and Polly because they sent over some of the best cat items I've ever seen, and Pura is in love with all of them. So Happy and Polly is basically a company dedicated to all of your cat essentials and needs. On their website, they have everything ranging from litter boxes, cat harnesses, cat toys, water fountains, and even cat trees. So they were kind enough to allow me to choose some of the items that I thought Pura would, be grateful to have in his daily life, So among the items, I picked out a ceramic mushroom water fountain, another ceramic feeding bowl, a cat dress, and an egg-shaped cat scratcher. However, I gotta say, the most important thing that he probably is in love with right now is his cat tree. So this is a really cool cat tree. It's called the transformable cat tree, where you can basically interchange the entire structure and set of the cat tree itself. Everything about the cat tree is made from pure wood, including the pillars, and the entire thing took me less than half an hour to set up. It was super easy. It's really stable, wherein each platform or level of the cat tree is large enough for the cat to sit comfortably on. I would say Pura's favorite spot on the cat tree would probably be the bowl. He basically sits in that bowl all day long. He loves lying in it to the point where he doesn't even sleep with me at night anymore. Like, I would come out in the morning and he would be just sitting in that bowl right here, just lounging away, living his best life. He is practically pretty much in love with it. Even when my friend brought her 2 cats over, they all loved sitting in that bowl. Pura was just on the floor just watching them, thinking to himself, damn it. It was just really funny seeing all 3 of the cats at some point or another trying to fit in that bowl, waiting for their turn. It's really cute. So if you guys are interested or looking to get your own kitty a gift, or a friend, a loved one, a niece, or a nephew that, has a lovely cat, you can use my code Ellies to get 10% off of any item on Happy and Polly. So definitely check them out. They have a lot of really cool stuff on their inventory. Again, everything will be linked down below, and thank you to Happy and Polly for sponsoring today's video. And with that being said, let us go ahead and get straight into the books. Not me waving my chopstick as if it was fan. So it's actually been like 3 months since I did like my last wrap up, I think. So we are going to go quite a ways back, just a little bit, back in March, to one of the last books I read in that month. And this book is These Silent Woods. So this one was really interesting because when I first heard about it, I heard nothing but good reviews, how slow, methodical, and just how thrillery it was. To my disappointment, this book had like a very small dose of thriller imbued into the book. I feel like this was more like a psychological family drama. It follows a father who lives in this cabin in the woods with his young daughter. And not to annoy you, but this is also one of those types of books where the less you know going into it, the better the experience will be. I would say not to expect too much thriller. I mean, from the small summary that I gave you, it pretty much follows this father who lives with his daughter in the woods. You don't know why. You don't know how they came to be living there. But that whole mystery is sort of like the main pivotal meat in the book, where you come to find out how that all happens and all that. And I gotta say, it was a little underwhelming. I kind of figured it out like halfway through the book. The book itself is very, very slow. This is one of those books that was on my radar for quite a while, and I'm really glad that I didn't buy it. This is one of those books where I listened to the entire audiobook on Scribd, and I'm really glad that I did. I think the audiobook enhanced the experience for me. I feel like I'm less critical, analytical when it comes to audiobooks in general. Maybe because what goes in one ear comes out the other, Like, I don't think my brain grasps like 100% of the story, but I thought it was fine. I think I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The ending for this book almost made me cry. Like, it made me tear up a bit. It was pretty sad, I gotta say, and pretty impactful. For a book that had very little thrills, it kind of made up for it in terms of hitting you in the feels, hitting you in all the right spots. But that's pretty much all I'm gonna say regarding that book. Would I recommend it? Yeah, I would. It's something different. It's not something jarring or chaotic or bloody. It's very subtle, very slow, tackles different aspects of fatherhood and grief. So, I almost cried. So there you go. So the next book we're gonna talk about is a book that I read on a plane to Vietnam a couple months back, and this is Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence. So this book actually was a book that I found browsing through the Los Angeles airport. I was browsing the bookstore, and I remember going to that bookstore in and out of it like 3 times because I could not decide which book to get. I think it was between this one and The Wilderness of Stars by Shay Earnshaw. This is the first book in a trilogy, the first book that I read from Mark Lawrence. It's actually kind of funny because I actually own a couple of his like recent releases. One of them being a book which I'll talk about later in this video as well. First in a trilogy, and this is also my first, I guess, step into like grim, dark fantasy. I think that's like the category that this book belongs to. Basically, it was very edgelord, very violent, very brutal and gruesome, with just lots of gore and sort of like the alpha male vibe attached to it. In the first book, it sort of veers in that direction, giving that podcast bro, tech, finance bro energy kind of vibe. But then it kind of comes back into like a more wholesome fantasy vibe, if you get what I mean. This had one of the most overt instances of fat shaming I have read in any book. Pretty much, if there's a fat character being introduced in this book, they're being ridiculed. They're being made fun of and put down in basically like the worst way possible. Like, according to this book, the fat people in this world have no chance. I don't know. It's giving Mark Lawrence back in 2011 not really liking fat people, like at all. I don't know what it was, but 2011 Mark Lawrence was just not it. Didn't like fat people, and every female character in this book, yikes. I mean, this book was pretty much 100% straight alpha male coded. Like, all the female characters were either supporting pillars for the male characters in this book, written for the male gaze, heavily brutalized, just all the things, the red flags you would typically want to avoid in fantasy in this current day and age. However, I gotta say though, aside from all those grievances, I gave this book 3 to 5 stars. I think just because of the tone, the setting, and the characters, the worlds, it was just that much enjoyable to me aside from, the rest of the things. The writing in here was really interesting. There were times where some parts of the book, I felt so juvenile to the point where I was like, I myself could easily write a book and get it published. Well, actually, I take that back because in this day and age, almost anyone can get published. Ask booktok. Apparently, this is like his first book that he's ever written. And after finishing the trilogy, I actually went ahead and read one of his recent books that came out this year. The writing in this book compared to his recent release, oh my God, astronomical. I want to say this was definitely the type of book where if you had read it maybe back in the day and age, I just know if I looked up a list here on YouTube or wherever on Google, a straight white man's list of his favorite fantasy novels, this would be on that list. I don't even think I told you what this book was about. I wrote it down in my notes here.
Literally about a hard-ass, angry, spouting Ashlord of a Nepal baby who goes on a revenge spree.
That is what Switch Trilogy is, in a nutshell. One of the main things that I did enjoy about this book was the fact that the main character, there's not a single redeeming quality. He is truly evil. You know how I'm always complaining about these morally great characters in other fantasy books who are like, yeah, I kill a couple bad people for the sake of humanity, for the good of the people, for everybody. However, the main character, Jorg, a literal 12-year-old child, the spawn of Satan. You know what they say when you give into like your impulses or like your dark thoughts or whatever? That's literally our main character. If he wants to kill that person is dead. If he wants to hurt that person is probably going to lose an eyeball. If he wants to teach another 12-year-old boy another lesson, that 12-year-old boy would probably be paralyzed for life. Like, I'm telling you, this child is fucking evil, but I am here for it. There is sort of an explanation as to why he is the way he is. But honestly, he's just a sociopath, and I was here for it. I just loved reading about this 12-year-old boy who was such a fucking menace to society, leading a group, 20 to 30 to 40, 50-year-old men, just like Robin Hood. But he was not Robin Hood. This was no Robin Hood, okay? This was like Gru and his minions. If Despicable Me was rated R. The plot twist in this book, though, I gotta say, did not wow me. There's a certain plot twist in here where I would advise you not to read the summaries for the next 2 books in this trilogy because spoilers. I truly don't understand when publishers decide to almost like spoil the ending of like the first book, summarizing what's going to happen in the second book. I'm just like, that makes no sense to me. I could literally just skip book 1 and read book 2. But anyway, what makes this book sort of iconic in like the fantasy community from what I read on like Reddit is the plot twist in here and the characters. But I can't really talk about it without going to spoilers. So if you want to discuss this book, maybe like type in spoilers down in the comments if you have read this book so you don't spoil it for other people, because I do think it's pretty unique, neat twist. So yeah, that's this book, and would I recommend it? I would. However, I would be careful going in sort of with all the trigger warnings because, oh my gosh, there are a lot of triggers in here, such as like rape, violence against women in particular. Pretty bad. All right, so I read the next 2 books in this trilogy, and I gotta say, I enjoyed each one more than the last. So with each consecutive book, I gave the second book 4 to 5 stars, and the third book also 4 to 5. Don't really have much to say regarding spoilers, but I did enjoy the trilogy overall as a whole. The trilogy itself was pretty good. I really enjoyed the story, how it all came together. I can't talk more about it without going to spoilers about why things are in certain ways and how they all come together in like book 2 and 3. It's a very unique fantasy, unlike anything I've ever read before, but also very basic and similar at the same time. It's also a fantasy book that has very little magic. Like the magic in here is so minuscule. You think a character like this is like 2 to 3 steps ahead. No, he's like 5 to 500 steps above everyone else. And it's just overall really wild to see how it gets from like point A to point Z, not even point A to point B. So after the trilogy, I went ahead and read the book that wouldn't burn. So interestingly enough, this was a book I found to be up my alley in terms of what the book was about. This book is a book about books, specifically about 2 different children and how their lives and destinies intertwine and merge together through stories. Legitimately up my alley. Like, this is the type of book I love to read about. Books about friendships, right? Did this book deliver on that? 100% yes. It didn't even hit me. I didn't even piece it together that Mark Lawrence was the same author for the 2 series, because the writing styles here, oh my God, totally different. If you had slapped another author's name on this book, I would have believed it. For a whole month straight, I was just reading Mark Lawrence, but I wasn't complaining because this book was so good. Honestly, if you aren't really the type of person to stomach or handle grimdark fantasy or how brutal and violent it was, and you want something more subtle, more low-key and tame, this book is for you. If you like books about books, just books in general, and just stories, and students learning so many different things in books in general, this is the book for you. This is the first book I want to say in a duology. It might be a trilogy, so don't quote me on that. I'm very excited to find out what happens next in the oncoming books, because the ending of this one, there are some big questions that are left to be desired. And to me, it was just so masterful how Mark brought everything, all the questions and secrets that I had in the beginning of the book, all the way to the end. It came in a full circle, and I fucking loved it. It was so good. The book itself is very slow and subtle. I would say it almost gave me, what was that book called? The Scholar Man's Trilogy by Naomi Novik. And if you like reading about students, the academic lifestyle, while also going on their own adventures, but it's also very self-contained and low-key, then I would highly and definitely recommend this book. Oh, and another book that this reminded me of so heavily was The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis, which is, a fun fact, one of my favorite installments from the Chronicles of Narnia. I honestly think The Magician's Nephew is so underrated, and this book right here, you'll know it when you read it. If you know, you know. And it's also very cozy as well. That sort of atmosphere that you love to read in like dark academia books. Definitely recommend for me, 4 out of 5. Let me just quickly read you some of the notes that I put on my phone here. It's The Magician's Nephew meets Sorcery of Thorns with a touch of babble. This is a book about the power of knowledge that comes through words, writing, and books, but mostly through stories. It has a cool element of taking place within a version of a post-apocalyptic world mirroring our own. This book hits in all the right mysterious feels of enigma, giving you the exact feelings and answers to a scent or memory you've misplaced. The book feels isolated in a way that's comforting. Oh my gosh, I'm really hyping this book up for you guys right now. All right, so moving on. The next book that I read, we're going to talk about The Fox Glove King by Hannah Witten. I am not going to be holding this book up for the entirety of this video, so it's going to go over here. But I have lots to say. I should have known. I just want to quickly point out the font in this book right here. When a font like this is just so big and ginormous and huge to the point where I don't even need glasses to be reading this book for an adult fantasy book, you just know. You just already know the characters, the cringe, the story, the romance, up it by an 11,000. So this book was going everywhere, like on BookTok, on BookTube in general. And I just saw this at Target the other day and I was like, you know what? It sounds interesting, right? I'm intrigued by the cover. I should have looked in the book and read like a couple chapters because it would have saved me $20. And here's why. I'm sitting down doing my daily diligence to help you do the same and save yourself the headache and the loss of $20. The writing for this book, oh my God. It was supposed to be adults. And you know what? I get it. I get it to a degree. You know, I've read books where the writing was a crossover between YA and adults. I don't think this book was supposed to be a crossover between YA and adult at all because honestly, it just sounded YA. It sounded so much YA. And you know what? There isn't anything wrong with that. But for the context and for the romance and the characters in this book, it just did not align because you know what? Reading this book and then going into this one, it's like reading The Song of Achilles going to the selection, right? But imagine that they're both marketed as adults, the selection included. And that's what I'm trying to say. You know what I found really annoying to me in this book? This book had no subtleties, or it was trying to be so subtle, too many times to count that it failed. There's this part in the book where she's talking to like this guy, right? And he smiles savagely at her for one split second, and she's imagining things like, wait, why did he smile like that? And he smiles normally, and she's like, oh, never mind. Girl, it means he's evil. He's a bad guy. But what do you know? Literally, 300 pages later, he's a bad guy. Like all the nuances in here, none. Like the bad guys were truly bad, and the good guys, wow, you couldn't even tell. While I still have my sense of control and sanity within me right now, let me just explain what this book is about. So this book follows our early 20s girl, our main character, who lives in this fictional part of France. She lives in this town with a tragic backstory, of course, with a mysterious past. But anyways, our main character is also different. She's very curvy compared to the mannequins that she sees in the stores, and she can also wield magic. Wow, shocker. The only interesting thing about this book was that she is sort of like a necromancer, and that's pretty much it. Even the logistics of how it all works, it didn't really make sense to me. But you know what? In a nutshell, it didn't even need to make sense to me because this book made no sense in general. Okay? So anyways, this girl, she wields this power, and one day she accidentally wields his power out in public for everyone to see. And so the king takes her in servitude to his kingdom because she has these powers that were long lost and forgotten real long time ago by these saints who were all sleeping, right? And what do you know? Throughout the book, she tries to figure out, her powers, figuring out if she likes one guy or the other, even though we already know who she's going to end up with. Honestly, I want to say Agatar is sort of like the blueprint. So if you read Agatar, you can pretty much guess any love interest in any romance book now. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. Oh, and she also has to figure out on her side quest who is killing, mass murdering all these villagers with a power similar to hers. All in a nutshell. Sounds interesting, right? I don't know what it is about Target. You go into the store just needing one thing, mentally preparing yourself that you only need one thing. And of course, since it's Target, you walk out with like 100 different items. I think that is what happened to me that day. Of course, I'm going to Target. Okay, so a thing I don't really care to read about in books are made up curse words, or where the author tries like a spin on a slang on a curse word, and honestly, half the time, actually more than half the time, it does not work. So you know how I said earlier, this book deals with like necromancy, saints, dead gods, and all that. So the slang in this book drove me insane. Almost every time they use the slang gods, right? Because there's like more than one god. There's like 12 different gods in this world. They always accompany it by a full fucking sentence. It's not like your everyday accompanied by like damn, shit, hell, whatever, right? It's always bleeding gods in the sky, bleeding God in his absent heart, bleeding God this, by God that, by God this and that. Oh my God. It drove me fucking insane. Okay? Literally, I lost track after counting 30 times. Bleeding God in his bleeding heart, bleeding God in his bloody wounds. I hated it. Boo. It was just so fucking bad. It was just so cringy. Like, why? Can you just imagine a 25-year-old just saying 30 times in their daily life,
bleeding God in his bleeding heart, you're beautiful. Bleeding God in his buried heart. Bleeding God and buried goddesses. You're so annoying.
Kill me. Bleeding God, bleed my brain and bleed my eyeballs. Like, I've had enough. It was so bad and so cringy. I honestly could go on like this whole spiel of how much and how many times they use this term. I even dedicated a whole paragraph to it as well. I'll just read you a little snippet. By God, by every bleeding God, by every God bleeding and buried. By God, clothed and bussin'. By God, bleached, dyed, bald, and true. By God, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And so on and so forth. You get the gist. I would get it, and I understand. It's a made-up world. You're gonna have made-up slang. But, bleeding God and buried goddesses. It was just too fucking much. Oh my God. Okay, so apparently, there's a scene in here where a character wraps a bandage around their hand, and the main character goes, bleeding God in a bandage. The word bandage was italicized to emphasize, like, what is there to emphasize? Bleeding God in a bandage. Can't. Anyways, you know how I was talking about subtlety earlier on, right? So anyways, our main character, again, she lacks a lot of subtlety, right? Or she refuses to see it because the main character in here, she sees like a golden shimmer of magic around the main love interest, and she can't figure it out for the love of her life, whether it's her mind playing tricks on her or it must be the sun, because yeah, she also has magic, but she can't accept the fact that other people also have magic as well. It was just honestly very infuriating to read. It was just honestly her lack of awareness for me. Also, I want to say that absolutely nothing happens in the middle of the book. Yeah, in the beginning, they're setting up like pivotal characters and moments and core plot points of the book. But let me tell you, that goes nowhere. Or it's so underwhelmed because when you get to the end, this book is around 450 pages, right? And I understand why maybe the font is so big on this book, because if it was any smaller, this book would like be 200 pages in length. If it was a 200-page book, it would not feel that way, because this book, it took me 2 weeks. 2 weeks to fucking finish because it was that boring and slow. I honestly don't even know why I didn't DNF it. The last 20 pages, I want to say, pretty much summarized everything that happened in this book. And the plot twist, everything that happened here, it was the most anticlimactic thing I've ever read. Like throughout the book, they're talking about the main character's like ascension, her time to call to power on this like special day that everyone goes through, right? We get to it, nothing really happens. She comes face to face with a few enemies. The guy that's supposed to be the twist that isn't a bad guy is the bad guy. Fucking shocker. Even her powers, that she's supposed to like save the day, she doesn't really use them to like the full potential that I thought she would. She lacks a lot of awareness, so maybe that's why. But all in all, this was a very tame, anticlimactic, boring book that you all should skip. It's pretty much the worst book I've read so far this year. So 1 out of 5 for me. Moving on, the next book that I read is The Divine Royals by Rebecca Ross. And thank God, this one was a good one. And funny enough, coming from the previous book where the font was just gigantic and big, this one was so tiny and so small. But I'm not complaining because this hit in all the right vibes and all the right feels. This book is about the people who are wrestling with grief and finding solace. That being alone sometimes isn't the worst possible outcome, isn't full of trepidation, but being constantly left behind by everyone you love can be. Don't you love how it just got all poetic? In a nutshell though, this book was a delightful surprise. It's sort of like a historical fiction mixed with a touch of light fantasy with a huge backdrop of political warfare. So this one primarily follows these two characters, and one of the characters is a sister writing to her brother during the war. And she discovers that every single time she types out a letter on her typewriter and slips it into her wardrobe, it disappears. However, the recipient on the other side isn't her brother getting the letters. It's someone else. And with these letters, they sort of build and correspond this relationship that was just super cute and really enchanting to read from. Basically, in a nutshell, it's about a girl who writes letters to her missing brother and a boy who receives them. I honestly had a really good time reading this book. The writing here was probably the best part for me. It was just super slow and poignant, like really gradual, almost with a slight sense of sensuality to it, which I found to be super comforting to read from. It's definitely a slow burn and not a lot happens in this book, but I was okay with it because I love the characters. The relationship between the two characters, let me just say another aspect that I really loved about this book, enemies to lovers. The enemies to lovers trope in here. So well done. It was just so good. Tell me why I thought this was a standalone, because the ending of this book, wow, you're just gonna leave it at that, right? So anyways, can't wait for the sequel. I heard it's like a duology. In all intents and purposes, I sincerely thought this book was a standalone, and I was about to fucking riot because the way it ended, like, there's no way this book could end the way it is because it just wouldn't make any sense. But yeah, at the end of the day, I don't have too much to say about it other than the fact that I really, really liked it, really enjoyed it. I thought the mythology and just the dealing with all like the different gods was just so interesting. But yeah, it was super enchanting, really beautiful. And I think I gave this one like 5 out of 5. So high praise from me. All right, we have come down to our final book in this video. And this was not the worst book that I read from this pile. I think it did somewhat have the potential to be one of the worst books, but I had a really fun time with it. I came into it with an open mind, sort of knowing what to expect. And you know what? Like, not every book has to be read super critically and analytically, right? I mean, if I have ever talked shit about your favorites and really bashed on it, I mean, at the end of the day, we all like different things, right? Take for an instance, I love men. A lot of you guys don't like men, and that's okay. So there you go. All right, so last but not least, we're going to talk about The Serpent and the Wings of Night. I had to look down to make sure I got it because this title, oh my fucking God, it's like a conundrum. I can never remember it. Every single time where I was trying to remember the title of this book, I would always call it The Serpent of Night and the Wings of Ruin. The Wings Serpent, the Wings and its Serpent, the Wings Serpent of Night. It was just so baffling to remember the title of this book for some reason. I don't know why. But I just gotta say, if you like Agatar by Sarah J. Maas, I think you might really enjoy this book. I, for one, while I did enjoy it to some degree, a lot of it was just so fucking ridiculous, but sort of in a good way. And here's why. So this book follows our main character who was saved by the king of vampires. This girl, she's human and she is somewhat of a vampire hunter, saving the few remaining humans in her city in this vampire kingdom. However, for all intents and purposes, she enrolls in this vampire competition in which there's only one winner. Think Hunger Games, but vampires, right? But the only caveat, this girl is a human against vampires who have freaking abilities. Tell me why and how this girl truly thought she could enroll in this vampire competition and survive. You know, that is just some main character energy that we all need. That boost of confidence that, fuck yeah, in this world of vampires where they can literally tear me apart, where they have like psychic powers, telepathy, blood magic, I can hold my own. Some good life lesson that we can take from this book. But anyway, she gets embroiled in this competition, and of course she gets entangled with one of the baddest assholes in the competition, aka her love interest. Because honestly, duh, if it weren't for this love interest who is a vampire, she would be unalived. at this point. You know, I gotta give it to her though. For all of her Delulu thinking that she could survive and win this, every single time she enters in a trial, there are like 4 or 5 trials in this competition that she has to partake in. They are magically transported away, and she always wakes up. She always wakes up last. She always wakes up last to the sound of screaming and fighting. And I'm like, every single time, how the fuck are you not dead? She has literally all the luck in the world. I guess that also comes with white privilege. Like, you're not gonna tell me that every single time this trial starts, no one is going after, no one is going straight for this frail human, but instead attacking each other. I mean, of course she has to have some form of plot armor, otherwise she's fucking toast, right? The ending of this book, though, I gotta say, brought it all home for me. I did skip some of the more smuttier scenes in this book where they're having sex and all that. Just didn't really interest me. The ending was really fun. It really delivered, and it sets up this whole premise for book 2. But here's the thing, while it did deliver, you know, I'm gonna dive into spoilers here, and if you wanna read this book, you can skip to this time frame that I'll leave on the screen. I really, really wish she did not use her one win, her one wish, her main take on her lover of a vampire, because what do you know? He came back to life and fucked it all up. I mean, obviously for the greater good, for yada yada, whatever. I just really wish she just allowed him to stay dead and just like won the entire thing. Just for herself, her namesake only. I felt like that would have been a much stronger just ending in general, but obviously no, because she fell in love with this guy who is obviously a recent dupe. She fell in love. He died, and she uses it to, you know, wish that he won instead. But yeah, it would have been better. Even if it was like leading on into like her villain era. So fucking what? Lean into that, embrace it. That would have been such a good ending in my opinion. She would be the reigning human queen over all these vampires, reigning aside with her dad. But obviously that would only happen in another world because it didn't happen in this one. I don't plan on reading the second book. I did hear from other readers and reading reviews that the second book did not live up as well as the first book did. These books, holy shit, they have such high ratings on Goodreads. I feel like Goodreads now can't trust the rating system. It's broken. Also, the writing here, surprisingly, wasn't that bad. However, when it was bad, it was pretty bad. There were times in here where I would be reading from like the head case, the head point of like the main character. The author would go ahead and describe like the building or whatever, some like weird description. And then the main character would be like in some other location, and she would be doing something else unparalleled to like the description that just happened. And I'll be like, what the fuck just happened? Like the sentence structure, the structuring wasn't structured. Like I had a hard time distinguishing what the author was trying to say versus the main character's POV. So the biggest ick for me with this book was that the main love interest would always call our main character Princess. Drove me insane. I just hate pet names, especially Princess. Really? You're gonna go with Princess? And every single time, oh my god, like almost every single time she gets defensive against his remarks or statements or just like aggressive against him in general. Like she gives him like that look. He's like, there she is. Oh my god. Every single time they're in a scene together, there she is. Like every single time she gives him the look, he's like, there she is. Also, another thing, you all already know how I feel about made up slang, especially when the slang revolves around gods and goddesses. I don't know, maybe it's because I've read it too many times in other fantasy books, but please, it's just too much now. Also, it's really funny. The other day, I was scrolling, all the reviews for this book, regarding this book, and I came across this review that said that they cried and sobbed their heart out at this book. No, it's not. It's not funny. I'm not trying to make fun of anyone. It was just funny in a sense. No, it's valid, completely valid to feel however you want in a book, and that's in your opinion. But this book, seriously, this book. All right, but that's pretty much it. We have come to the conclusion of this video and all the books that I have recently read. I just have a couple quick announcements before I end the video. So first one up being I am finally hosting my own trip with Trovo Trip to Mexico City. So I don't know if you guys were aware, but I went on the last 2 trips hosted by Cindy to Thailand and Vietnam. And those 2 trips, oh my god, they were so fun, so eye-opening. I learned so much, the culture, the food, and we just had a complete blast. Like honestly, memories I'll always cherish and remember forever. But I'm finally excited and happy to say that I'm hosting my own trip to Mexico City in the summer of 2024. This will be a trip held in July with Cindy this time possibly being my +1. This will be in July 18th to the 23rd. And the booking page is live. I'll leave everything linked down below, which you can check out. I also tried for this trip to be as cheap as possible. The early bird pricing is $2,200 for the first 8 spots, I believe. And then after that, regular pricing, it's $2,400. So you save around $200 if you early book on the page. It's gonna include 5 breakfasts, 2 dinners, local guides, accommodations, airport transfers, Does not include airfare, visas, travel insurance, and other meal options not mentioned in the itinerary. So some of the trip itineraries will be a city tour, local market visits. Some optional ones will be like Frida Kahlo's Casa Azul visits, a Lucha Libre evening, a Basilica tour, hot air balloon tour, as well as a cooking class and some cocktail mixing. So that sounds like your cup of tea, and you want to spend, about a week in Mexico City with me, enjoying new food, stuffing our faces, and just, have new experiences together. Definitely go ahead and sign up using my link down below. If you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. Last but not least, I'm also thinking of starting a Patreon, and more details to come with that soon. And I'm really excited about it because I've been revising and setting it up in the past couple of months now. So stay tuned for that. But that's pretty much it for this entire video. Please let me know if you have read any of the books down below. What you guys think, how many books you guys have read in the past couple of months. And yeah, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you all soon in a new video.